I'm Izzy, and this is Under Deconstruction. It would be silly not to acknowledge what's going on in the world today. There is a pandemic, a disaster of worldwide proportions, and we have no choice but to face it head on. In this second minisode of the podcast, I want to give you some facts, a little bit of analysis, and some advice. I encourage you to take a deep breath, settle in for a few minutes, and just listen. There's a lot of misinformation out there right now. It's to be expected, living in this age of rapid globalization. Now, more than ever, it's important that you make sure to check your sources and avoid taking in a constant stream of varying information and opinions at once, for example, on your Twitter feed. It won't help you in a practical sense, and it's definitely not good for your mental health. A better approach would be to set aside some time each day to check for updates from verified sources and Google any specific questions you may have. When that time is up, turn it off. Move on to whatever you need right now. A snack, a movie, a cuddle with your pet, a walk around the block. It's tempting to fall into the infinite scroll. I know, because I've been doing just that for the last couple of weeks. But it's not necessary, and it may harm you more than it helps. This flood of information is primarily focused on the numbers. Right now, I want to talk about something else. In The Sociology of Disaster, Thomas E. Drabek notes, "Too often we think only in bean counter terms. That is, the number killed or injured, or economic cost, be it in estimated dollars or number of homes or businesses damaged or destroyed. These metrics, while important, constrain our understanding of how strange social systems contribute to human failure, pain, and at times premature death." It's notable that a lot of the articles that are scaring people involve these bean counter terms. I think we tend to react negatively to these numbers, either because we can't comprehend them, or because they feel like scare tactics. Talk of the stock market crashing, death toll rising, and inadequate number of hospital beds is bound to make people freeze up. But I think we need to remember that there is more to the story. In a time like this, the flaws in our social and economic systems quickly become evident. We haven't been making sure our communities are taken care of, and it shows. No one should have to avoid getting medical treatment because they can't afford it, or go to work despite health concerns because they'll lose their job if they don't. The rush to hoard supplies that are not logically necessary in a disaster situation is actually well studied and to be expected at this time. Items like toilet paper and water bottles are flying off the shelves, even though the water quality is not affected, and self-quarantine periods for people who are sick are no more than 2 weeks long. And face masks, which are meant for people who are sick or suspect they might be sick to prevent the spread of illness, are instead being sported by healthy people looking for any barrier they can put between themselves and others to avoid getting sick. These people completely ignore facts and continue panic buying, behavior which becomes fodder for many a think piece and meme. But the reality is the effects of hoarding are serious for the most vulnerable in our communities. Some folks with chronic conditions and other disabilities are unable to stand in that 2-hour-long Costco line that you waited in. Older people not wanting to risk infection still need groceries too. And families who can only buy WIC-approved foods will be out of luck if people don't carefully check which items they're selecting at the store. In Charlie Warzel's New York Times opinion piece, he explains how, quote, "A pandemic offers a great way to examine American class inequities. All that tech that newly remote employees intend to use cannot exist without putting other people at risk, people who cannot afford to stop working. They may go to the grocery store on their customers' behalf and deliver their next day online shopping orders. They may staff those stores and facilities themselves. In doing so, they are being forced to choose between going without a paycheck and risking infection. When that paycheck also comes with the guarantee of continued health insurance coverage, the decision becomes even more difficult. For those people who are able to work from home, the least they can do is try to take care of themselves and avoid putting pressure on those workers who don't have the same freedom of choice. Pretending like nothing is wrong and continuing to overburden them is unnecessary and unfair." Speaking for myself, I am already a remote part-time employee for a law firm, so my workdays are the same now as they were before the current crisis. The writing and podcasting I do on my off days can easily be transitioned from the coffee shop to my apartment. My grad student husband and I are privileged to be working jobs that, though not high paying by any means, allow us the flexibility to work from home. Just the other day, he told me that all students were receiving free upgrades for Zoom, the video conferencing service that many labs, offices, and classes are now using to hold meetings and courses. And the apartment we live in, though small and technically student housing, will not be evacuated like so many undergraduate dorms have been, forcing students to scramble for alternative housing. Even if they have a safe place to go, non-local students may have to risk going through airports to get home. But for those students who have nowhere to go, international students, students who need their on-campus jobs to afford rent, and students that don't have a safe second option, the situation is even worse. Unfortunately, as is often the case with situations like this, public response in Europe and the US, and really across the world, has been laced with racism. There was the young student from Singapore who was brutally attacked by a group of men in London who yelled, "I don't want your coronavirus in my country." Then there were the Dutch school kids who posed with a sign reading "Corona time," dressed in traditional style Chinese outfits and hats, with one girl even pulling her eyes in a racist mockery of East Asians. All around the world, people are channeling their fear and ignorance into physically and mentally abusive behavior that is racist and xenophobic. If you think these two are isolated cases, think again. Wikipedia has an entire page dedicated to incidents just like these, from all over Latin America, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, the UK, the US. Now, if you're listening right now and thinking, "Oh, I just can't think about all that, it's too much," I understand where you're coming from. But I'd like to invite you to sit with your discomfort for a little bit and recognize that what is merely a stress-inducing thought for you may be a genuinely terrifying reality for someone else. It's okay to feel worried or anxious at the thought of all the people who are at higher risk than yourself. That feeling you're having is essential to preserving any semblance of community we have left. It's rooted in empathy, deep compassion for people other than yourself, and you should feel it, because in moments like this, all we have is each other. Even the choice to stay home is a decision based on community. It's not just a means to protect yourself, and it's not giving in to panic. Those of us who are low risk are helping to prevent the spread of the virus to people who are high risk. Community-based mitigation strategies are essential to an effective pandemic response, and the United States already took too long to respond and administer testing efficiently. So now is not the time to buy a cheap flight or go out with a bunch of friends. I've been hearing people say things along the lines of, "It won't affect me, so who cares? I'm here for a good time, not a long time. It only affects old people and I'm young, so it doesn't matter." It might be all talk, just a way to lash out as a coping mechanism, but it's a concerning mentality that shows an unwillingness to think from a community perspective. I get that it can be frustrating, especially for those of us who are younger. We have witnessed older generations abuse our planet and ignore our pleas for social justice for decades. For once, this virus is something that disproportionately affects only those older generations and leaves most younger folks asymptomatic or healthy. It might feel like a kind of fucked up justice to some people, but we can't fall into that mindset because it's based on false information. Forget all the wealthy older people in our society who can afford to lock themselves away with a city's worth of food, toilet paper, and face masks. There's nothing we can do about their selfishness, and so long as our society has massive economic inequality, those people will always be safer than the rest of us. It's not fair, and I'm not asking you to pretend that it is. But they are not the only people at risk. The hospitals aren't just empty and waiting, available to test and treat COVID-19 patients only. I overheard someone today saying, "Cancer kills more people than this virus anyway," as if that was some kind of justification to not take this pandemic seriously. Even if you still think cancer is more serious, consider this. Hospitals are already full of people who still need care, some of whom are cancer patients. There isn't some second wave of extra doctors and nurses to make up for the influx of coronavirus patients. Think of those individuals already in the hospital who cannot survive without constant medical attention. If Americans all get sick at once, the hospital overflow will force those people to face the deadly consequences of becoming last priority after coronavirus patients. We know this because it's what happened in Italy. Think of your friends who have chronic illnesses, who were already in pain every day before this virus even existed. A condition as common as asthma could put folks at a higher risk of complication should they become ill. How could any of us forget to care for our communities, for our families, and for our friends? All because we are feeling helpless and frustrated at being asked to stay inside? To be completely frank, how dare any of us think that one of our lives might be more valuable than someone else's? I don't care about those folks who are able to buy their way into a world where their lives are higher priority. They can live in that heartless illusion, but that doesn't mean that the rest of us should just follow suit. If we do, we'll just reinforce the social inequalities we were so angry about in the first place. To those folks with anxiety disorders, I feel you. Each one of us will cope differently. For me, the more I structure my days and plan the ways I can do my part, the better I feel. It makes me feel more in control, which calms my nerves. At the same time, I nearly had another panic attack yesterday, even though I was watching the sunset with my husband in the calmest setting possible. The lack of control in this situation is overwhelming for those of us who are constantly worrying anyway. If you need to take large amounts of time to pretend none of this is happening, that works too. Do whatever you need to do right now. This is the time for all of us to invent a new reality. I'm going to take a walk this evening. I'm going to throw my friend a virtual birthday party next month. I'm going to play the new Animal Crossing video game on Friday. I'm going to video chat with old friends I haven't seen in months. I'm going to listen to my favorite albums over and over again. I'm going to finish my Harry Potter movie marathon. I'm going to let my cat snuggle on my lap all morning, even if it means I don't get up till noon. Some days I'm going to learn new recipes with healthy ingredients. Other days I'm going to eat takeout and boxed mac and cheese. Some days I'm going to work out at home. Other days I'm going to lie down and just try to breathe. It won't be easy. Change never is. There are people who are choosing to be selfish and inconsiderate. There are people who are choosing to take risks with the fate of other people. We don't have to be them, because the world is not going to stop changing. We should make the choice to live for each other, and not just for ourselves. Thanks for listening. I hope you've been enjoying these minisodes. Once Bucky can get his hands on a new mic, we might just have to make these individual episodes and videos for now. Check us out on Instagram at Under Deconstruction Podcast, and email us any questions or comments at underdeconstructionpodcast@gmail.com. See you next time.